times.
Police say she is allegedly a cold-blooded killer. The critical mistake this mom turned murder suspect allegedly made.
Imagine waking up tomorrow, making coffee, packing your kids' lunches, and driving to your high-end real estate job in Dallas, while knowing deep down that 14 years ago, you left a human being butchered in a pool of blood. She thought she got away with it. You already know what I'm about to say, because we see this time and time again when the people who claim to protect us look the other way for over a decade. 14 whole years. A young 33-year-old mother named Iraima Chavez is found inside her own home in Arlington, Texas, stabbed more than 100 times. Think about that number for just a second. 100 separate strikes. The medical examiner couldn't even count them all without losing track of the sheer savagery inflicted on a defenseless woman inside her own apartment. And look, the front door wasn't kicked in.
One of the major pieces of evidence is this video from the night of her murder. It's surveillance video that police say shows a shadowy figure in sweats going up the stairs to Chavez's apartment. You can see they keep their head down. It does appear that they try to open the door, but after that, they just wait. And after about a minute, the door opens and they go inside. Family members went to check on Chavez the next morning and they found her dead.
There was no broken glass, no sign of forced entry whatsoever, which means Iraima opened that door herself to someone she trusted, someone who walked right past her kitchen, picked up a weapon, and tore her life apart, while her family was left to pick up the pieces. And what did the mainstream news do back in 2012? They ran a 30-second clip, called it a robbery gone wrong because a cheap television was missing, and then let the story die. But you know, just like I know, when a crime is that personal, when that much hatred is dumped onto a victim, it is never just a simple robbery. So the case sat cold. The police files gathered dust on a shelf in North Texas, while a killer walked free among innocent families. And this is the part nobody talks about. For 14 years, while Iraima's family wept every single Christmas at an empty dinner table, her killer was living the absolute American dream. We're talking about a woman named Mayra Velasquez. On the outside, she was the picture-perfect suburban mom, a successful Texas real estate agent, showing off luxury homes, posting pictures from beach vacations in Jamaica, posing with her newborn baby, and traveling across Europe. She built an entire life of privilege and fake smiles, completely convinced that the system had forgotten what she did in that apartment in 2012. But we all knew this day would come, didn't we? Because no matter how much money you make, no matter how clean your social media profile looks to the world, you cannot outrun divine justice, and you certainly cannot outrun the physical truth left behind at the scene of a crime. When the Arlington homicide detectives processed that room back then, they found a single tiny drop of fresh blood on a TV stand. It wasn't the victim's blood.
Strongly that we had was a droplet of fresh blood that was recovered from a bedroom TV stand inside the apartment. The crime lab determined that the blood sample did not come from the victim and it belonged to an unidentified Hispanic female. Detectives uploaded the DNA profile into CODIS, which is a national database used to compare DNA profiles in criminal investigations. But we never got a match.
It belonged to an unknown female who had cut herself during the violent attack. They uploaded that profile to the federal CODIS database, and guess what happened? Nothing. Not a single ping for years, because the government databases only catch people who have already been caught. If you stay off their radar, the federal system leaves you invisible. Now here's where it gets interesting, and frankly, it ought to make your blood boil.
We never got a match.
In 2016, 4 years after Chavez's murder, that blood sample taken from a TV stand in her apartment was provided to a DNA testing company called Parabon Nanolabs. The company was able to put a profile together of what the killer may look like. And this is what they came up with. A woman believed to be in her 20s. Let's just take a moment to talk
In
about this.
2016, a private company called Parabon Nanolabs took that blood droplet and used advanced DNA phenotyping to construct a digital face of the killer. They produced a composite image of a Hispanic female in her 20s with specific facial structures and dark hair. It was an exact mirror image of Mayra Velasquez back in 2012, an absolute dead ringer. Yet somehow, despite having that exact visual profile sitting in a police folder, the case continued to collect dust for another 8 full years. Why did it take from 2016 all the way until late 2024 for law enforcement to finally hand that file over to the FBI's genetic genealogy unit? Why were ordinary citizens left living next door to an uncharged suspect while bureaucrats sat on their hands? You know the answer as well as I do.
Agree.
In 2024, Arlington police asked the FBI to help take on the case and test the blood sample using genetic genealogy. Joseph Scott Morgan, professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University, longtime death investigator, is going to join me here in just a moment to talk about how that technology works. But essentially, it means that you can match a potential suspect to a DNA sample going through their family tree using publicly available databases like 23andMe. Now, police in this case won't say where they got the break that led them to Velasquez. Eventually, law enforcement, though, zeroed in on her as a potential suspect in January of this year. She's a 42-year-old mom who on social media appeared to work as a real estate agent in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And police say she did know the victim. They were close friends, and Velasquez actually lived close to Chavez back in 2012.
She was a close friend of the victim who lived just a few miles away from the crime scene. With this new information in hand, our homicide unit began conducting follow-up investigation into Ms. Velasquez. In May, they were able to obtain a sample of DNA from a discarded trash, and we sent it to our crime lab for further analysis. The lab determined that the DNA was a match to the droplet of blood recovered from the crime scene.
The system doesn't move unless someone forces their hand, or unless a private citizen's commercial DNA upload happens to cross their desk. And that brings us to January of this year. Using public genealogy databases, the very same databases millions of Americans use every day to trace their family trees, investigators finally traced that single drop of blood to a distant cousin, and that cousin's tree pointed straight at Mayra Velasquez. Suddenly, the pristine real estate agent in Dallas had a target on her back. But they needed direct, fresh, physical proof to lock her down before she could run or use her resources to hide. So undercover officers began tailing her every move through the streets of Texas. They watched her drive to a local restaurant, sit down with her friends, smile, laugh, and eat lunch like she didn't have a care in the world. And the moment she finished her meal, threw her trash away, and walked out the door, the surveillance team moved in like hawks. They didn't grab a wine glass or a fancy napkin. They reached into the trash container and pulled out 2 used plastic forks that had touched her mouth.
For Velasquez. According to court records, once police narrowed in on her as a potential suspect, they started surveying her. And without her knowing, according to WFAA television, they followed Velasquez to a restaurant where she had lunch with friends. Police say when lunch was over, she left, and then undercover officers moved in and collected 2 plastic forks that she used, and they submitted it for testing. They also tested a cup reportedly and a plate, according to WFAA. Now, police say the DNA from a fork matched the DNA profile of that blood found in the bedroom on the TV stand of Iraima Chavez 14 years ago.
2 cheap, disposable plastic forks. Actually, wait. Think about the irony of that for a moment. A woman evades justice for over a decade, builds a fortune selling homes, raises a child, travels the globe, and it all comes crashing down because of a piece of throwaway plastic at a lunch spot. The lab ran the DNA off those forks against the 2012 TV stand blood drop, and it was a total, undeniable match. On May 16th, officers pulled her over during a routine traffic stop, slapped the handcuffs on her wrists, and booked her into the Tarrant County Jail on capital murder charges. I want to pause here for just a second, because I need you to stay with me on this. When you look at her mugshot, the tear-streaked face, the smeared makeup, the sudden realization that her fake world has completely collapsed, it's easy to feel a quick flash of anger. But I want you to think about what this really says about the state of our country right now. We live in a society where honest, hard-working Americans follow the rules, raise their children with faith and traditional values, pay their taxes, and try to do what's right every single day. And yet, right under our noses, people can commit the most horrific acts imaginable.
Slide right into polite society, put on a business suit, and act like they're better than everyone else. It makes you feel like the whole game is rigged against decent people who just want safety and justice for their families. Because this isn't just about one bad actor in Texas. This is about a broken culture that allows evil to hide in plain sight under a mask of wealth and respectability. When police finally interrogated Velasquez after her arrest, they confirmed she had been close friends with Iraima Chavez. They lived just a few miles apart. Velasquez had been inside that apartment
Information
before.
in this case that gave a lot of context as to how Chavez knew her alleged killer, Mayra Velasquez. They also say that Velasquez had been in the apartment before. It is unclear if Velasquez was ever a person of interest back in 2012, but according to this news conference today, police say she did speak to investigators after her arrest, but it is unclear what she may have said. Police also said that at this time, they're not looking at anyone else in connection to this murder.
Miss Velasquez was interviewed, and in that interview, we learned information that will be helpful in that process. I'm not going to disclose that right now. They were friends, and Miss Velasquez had been in the apartment before. But we were able to obtain some information from her in the interview, which will help in...
She knew the layout. She knew Iraima's schedule, and she knew exactly when her friend was vulnerable. When the lead detective stood at the podium during the press conference and was asked what it felt like to call Iraima's family after 14 years, she broke down in tears.
14 years after this murder, and what it was like to share the news with a family that had been waiting for justice and answers for so long.
Telling the family.
Telling the family, that's why being able to share that with the family is why we do this work. They were very grateful. It was emotional, but everybody who's involved in this, whether you're the detective, whether you're on the FBI's IGG team, whether you're a crime scene working behind the scenes, everybody who touches a case like this feels that elation when it's solved, feels the pain for the family, and the reason why we all give so much of ourselves is for that.
She couldn't even finish her sentence for nearly 30 seconds. That detective felt the weight of 14 years of official delay. 14 years of a grieving family waiting for someone in power to give a damn about a murdered young mother. And look at what police recovered from the crime scene back in 2012 that they kept quiet all this time. Iraima's cell phone. That phone contained records showing the exact nature of their relationship right up to the night of the killing. Yet it took over a decade for officials to connect the dots between the phone records, the physical evidence, and the trash in a restaurant bin. This wasn't an accident. Not an accident at all. It shows you how close a suspect can come to walking away forever when the authorities don't move with urgency unless the public forces them to. So now, Mayra Velasquez sits in a jail cell facing capital murder. Her jet-setting lifestyle wiped out in a single afternoon. Her family is shattered, Iraima's family is still trying to heal from a decade-long nightmare, and the media is already moving on to the next flashy distraction. But we have to ask the hard questions that Washington and the mainstream press want to sweep under the rug. How many other cold cases are sitting in government filing cabinets right now while suspects live in luxury next door to your family? How many times does the system have to fail innocent victims before the people in charge are held accountable for letting dangerous individuals walk our streets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because you know as well as I do that if we don't demand truth and justice, nobody else will.